Welcome to the City Council meeting for September the 17th, and ask those that can to stand as we start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any agenda additions, deletions, or amendments? Do we have anybody sign up for citizen participation? Thank you. As I call you to the table, if you would keep your comments to about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, I'd appreciate it. Connie Pierce? Am I reading it? Connie. It looks like D-E-A-R-C-E or D-E-A-R-L-E. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Is that you? I'm sorry? You're Connie? Okay, you're up first. You have writing like me. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Right here?
Yes, that'll be fine. It'll pick you up.
My name is Connie Pierce. I'm the president of Covenant Nose 5 in Bowie, Maryland. And I'm here tonight to discuss loitering in our development. I've called the police. I wrote the chief of police. And we have a problem with young men. They littering, they taking over the sidewalks. They're smoking marijuana. I went by last night, walked around the development, it's like 20 of them all together, and I called the police, and they said, we got people coming out, and they hanging out at like 3900 block East View Lane. And we've been having this problem all summer, and they're not doing anything, and our property is going down, they're not selling.
Have you discussed this with the police?
Yes, we wrote the chief a letter.
Okay. All right. Before you leave, I want to see you have a chat with either the city manager or assistant manager, and we will look into this and we'll find a solution.
Yeah, they was like yesterday. It was like 20 of them all together, and I called the police. I've called every day, and they're not doing anything. They continue to stay there.
All right, we'll find out what we can do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your interest. If you see this, Dustin, you're next. Spears, if you see Mr. Lott. Welcome, sir.
Hey. How's everyone doing?
Fine. Doing well.
I'm Dustin Kuzan for the audience. I'm chair of the Multimodal Transportation and Public Spaces Group, also known as MAPS, and just here to express interest or support for funding of the Phase 2 of the Heritage Trail. And I understand we're in a very contentious time right now with the budget and tax rates and all that, but I'd like to make a case for why we should fund this project. And we actually, it all came to me at the meeting I was just at, the Green Team Executive Committee meeting, where we talked about the future of Bowie and how we need to make Bowie more attractive to young people that want to move here, because as we have a population of people that may be aging, and it gets to the point where, you know, people can't maintain their homes. A lot of houses are going to go up for sale. We already see that our houses in this area aren't competitive in price to other areas, meaning that maybe people don't want to move to Bowie like some of the other areas. And so we need to kind of create something in Bowie that gives us kind of an identity and a culture and a sense of place. And Phase 2 of the Bowie Heritage Trail is a great example of one of those projects. And it's already at a point now where it's ready to go. It's fully designed. It has huge community support and other support from other groups in the area. So I think this is a good project that could serve as a good example of a placemaking project that can help bring a sense of culture and a sense of place to the community. So it might, in the long run, it may actually help to increase the value of old Bowie, which has been struggling for years to, kind of be a sense of place in Bowie. So I'd like to just make that case and ask if you guys can consider that for funding. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you, and thank you for your ongoing interest in that. Okay, city committees, we have two appointments to make now. Councilwoman Glass?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two appointees to the Arts Committee. The first will be Jacqueline Thompson. She was interviewed on September 4th, and we concurred to appoint her to the committee for a 2-year term. So I make a motion to appoint Jacqueline Thompson to serve as a member of the Arts Committee.
Second by Mr. Marcus. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous?
And second, I have Miss Marion Thomas, and she was interviewed on August 6th and appointed on September 4th. However, she was unable to attend the September 4th meeting where we did make a motion which passed. So we just need to get her sworn in so we can bring them both up at the
Moved
same
and second by
time.
Mr. Marcos. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Would you join us up here, please? Now, I assume these pictures are going to show up in your gallery?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for agreeing to serve on this. You've been nominated. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand after I say aye. If you will follow with your name, and we'll follow through. Aye. Your name.
Jacqueline Thompson, I'm sorry. Jacqueline Thompson. Marion Thomas.
Do swear or affirm
Do swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and that I will be faithful
and that I will be faithful
and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland
and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland
and support the Constitution and laws thereof,
and support the Constitution thereof,
and that I will,
and I will,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
to the best of my skill and judgment,
diligently and faithfully,
diligently and faithfully,
without partiality or prejudice,
without partiality or
execute the office of
execute the office of
regular member of the Arts Committee
regular member of the Arts Committee
according to the constitutional laws of the state.
according to constitutional laws of the state.
Congratulations, and thank you very much. Let's come in and say hi to each of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's in-
Thank you very much. It was so good to see you. A little ill. How you doing? Thank you.
Thank you for your. I was teasing Mrs. Thompson because she has a beautiful art gallery in
Okay.
Bowie Town Center.
You want to stand up there? Just like-
Oh, okay.
Okay. No problem at all. Okay. Thank you, ladies.
As I was saying, I was teasing Mrs. Thompson because she has a beautiful art gallery in Bowie Town Center.
Oh, really?
And I know this will be prominently displayed there. Okay. City manager report?
Mr. Mayor, good evening, and I learned the word in Korean, it's samida, and thank you, so I'm passing on my travels to you. Seriously though, last week as we got ready for Hurricane Florence, as she was approaching this area, I want you to know that our team of emergency management team, led by Lee Cornwell, we were exceptionally prepared for this event, unfortunately, and we were prepared to actually open the Emergency Operations Center on last Friday. However, as you all know, the storm gave us a break. But I want you to know is that all aspects of the planning process was adhered to, and we were absolutely ready for this event if it had come this way. Thank you, sir.
Well, from our observation and all the emails back and forth from you and your staff, we're certain that you all were prepared, and we're only thankful that we didn't have to use you. But give our thanks and appreciation to all those people that did such a great job in preparing.
Welcome.
Thank you for.
Thank you for the Bowie alert.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the Bowie alert. Okay. All right, consent agenda, items A through D. Do I have a motion?
I actually have a quick question on one of the items, real fast.
Okay.
Sorry, just on the, Mr. City Manager, on the fire hydrant painting, I'm so glad this is on here. I got residents in Rockledge who are going to be thrilled. I'm noticing that some of these are scheduled out to fiscal year 2028. Am I reading that right? I'm seeing FY19 through FY28.
Well, let me make sure I'll catch up.
I'm comfortable with the contract we selected, so I'm happy to say yes. But as far as the timing, or with the selection of this contractor, but as far as the timing of the project, I just have a couple residual questions, which maybe we can take up at a later time.
I'm happy to talk to you about it, but yes, we can see what we can do on the schedule.
But as far as the contract, I'm comfortable with this particular guy.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion? Move favor, second by Mr. Marcos. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. New business, Maryland 3 improvements at Forest Drive.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have Erica Rigby, who is representing the district engineer, prepared to give us an update on those improvements. Right there. You go up to the mic.
Welcome. Glad to have you here.
I was under the impression that there would be a PowerPoint, but I did bring copies of our presentation if
That'll be
you would
fine.
like to see.
Did you bring did you have a soft copy that can put that up?
Oh, sure, just a moment.
Thank you, sir. I think we have this.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Just try to accommodate the state. Oh, there you go. Bowie Magic.
Thank you.
Welcome again.
So this project has been around for quite a while. It started a little bit before my time, my tour in the district. I'm sorry, I did not properly introduce myself. I'm Erica Rigby. I'm the Deputy District Engineer for District 3. That's Prince George's and Montgomery County.
You want to raise that microphone up or bring it a little closer to you so the folks at home can hear you better.
Okay, can you all hear me now? Is that better?
We can.
Okay, thank you. So this is just a slide showing the area location. So this project is just north of the 50 and 301 interchange. Let's get the next slide, please. So the purpose of this project was to improve access to Maryland 3 for the residents that live on Forest Drive. My understanding is that at some point in the past, there was people noted that there was an issue with the school bus being able to make the right-hand turn from Maryland 3 southbound onto Forest Drive, and that was when people initially started to go out and look at this location. Next slide, please. So there are quite a few pieces to the project. So first, it's going to increase the turning radius at the intersection of southbound Maryland 3 and Forest Drive. That will allow us to accommodate school buses and other large vehicles. We are going to extend the acceleration and deceleration lanes along the outside shoulder of southbound Maryland 3 to better accommodate those who are entering and exiting Forest Drive. There will be a channelized island. We'll show that in a later slide, but this will help to protect drivers as they're making that movement onto Forest Drive and out of Forest Drive onto Maryland 3. This is also going to prevent drivers from being able to utilize the crossover. So that was part of that, and that was really the impetus of this, as we saw drivers trying to go from Forest Drive across southbound Maryland 3 to the crossover, and then go left onto northbound Maryland 3. That was an unsafe movement. So this channelizing island will prevent drivers from making that maneuver. And that also was part of, that was also part of a study looking at sight distances. So I'll also discuss that a little bit more. We'll also have a marked bicycle lane along Maryland 3 southbound. There will also be additional drainage facilities to improve drainage along the roadway. The pavement will be widened and upgraded with the existing traffic barriers. Upgrade of the existing traffic barriers. And we will also mill and resurface all the lanes on Maryland 3 southbound. There will, of course, be new signs and pavement markings, including the raised pavement markings. And intersection lighting at the crossover intersections to improve visibility for U-turn movements. So this is the condition that many of you are probably familiar with. Right now, people are allowed to come out of Forest Drive. They can cross over and make a left to go north on Maryland 3, or they can go to the right and go down. There is a small crossover a little further south, or they can go down to the interchange. If you are on northbound Maryland 3, you can now utilize that crossover and make a left to go into Forest Drive. The way that we are going to do the concrete work there, that movement will no longer be allowed. You can still make a left there to access the SHA Salt Dome for our purposes, and also I believe there's a hotel on the northern side of that. But otherwise, drivers who would need to make that left into Forest Drive would be asked to go up to Sylvan, and they would be able to make a left there. So that is the existing condition that's currently out there. Next slide, please. These are just some additional visuals to help you guys, if you haven't been out there recently, looking across Maryland 3 southbound from Forest Drive, and then also looking upstream from Maryland 3 southbound from the crossover. So you can see that difference in topography and how it can make it very difficult for someone who is on southbound, and we all know that traffic can be very heavy and drivers are trying to get through the corridor quickly, and it's difficult to see people who are exiting from Forest Drive. This is looking downstream along Maryland 3 southbound from Forest Drive, and then also looking upstream along Maryland 3 southbound from the crossover. So again, you can see the difficulty in drivers being able to be seen who are entering and exiting from Forest Drive as well as from the crossover. So this is, again, the proposed improvements. I know it's a little small. You guys do have the slides in front of you. So again, there is going to be a channelizing island that will allow people traveling along. I'm sorry, you can't hear me? Did someone say that?
She is talking about.
Okay, I'm sorry. So again, people who are traveling along southbound Maryland 3 who want to make a right turn into Forest Drive, there'll now be a channelizing island, and it'll be wider to make it easier for everyone to access. And then it'll also channelize to allow them to come out and get up to speed. Those people who are exiting Forest Drive on the eastern side of that roadway, we're going to extend that deceleration lane to make it easier for them to access the crossover. Not everyone may feel comfortable accessing the crossover, so they can go down to the interchange in order to come back around. Again, this sort of shows how the crossover itself will be changed, so people will be able to make a left into the crossover to access the Salt Dome and the hotel. And then again, northbound traffic can make that left in, but they won't be able to get across, and they would also need to use Sylvan. So that's our proposed improvements. Next slide, please. This is a close-up of the intersection modification itself that sort of shows everything we're doing. The blue also shows the stormwater management that'll be going in as part of this project. So we think this will allow for a better condition so that those in the Forest Drive back on that community, they won't be coming back out, and they won't the island will also provide some protection, so those coming southbound. So we think that this provides a better condition. And then lastly, because we understand that this could potentially be an inconvenience for those who live in the area, they are used to utilizing the crossover to come across and make that left to go northbound. So we did a couple of different drive times where someone came out and they were comfortable utilizing the first crossover. They could do that. That is the purple. And then we also did another drive time with the yellow. And I believe overall it was, I want to say 3 minutes. So it is an increase, but it is not a significant increase. We understand that there will be times where there is traffic and there will be some inconvenience for drivers in the area. This again is the crossovers, and as they're shown, and the various signage that will be going up to help drivers navigate this area, the stop conditions. There was a traffic study done to reevaluate the corridor based on new traffic data, and there was a signal warrant analysis results for peak hour volumes and delays. So the potential benefits are the improved traffic operations, gaps in traffic, opportunities for the side streets to better merge onto Maryland 3, and then the protected left is obviously, from the cross. Yes, the protected left-hand turn movement from the crossover from Sylvan Drive. So currently, our contractor has already received notice to proceed, and they will. And we had a meeting for the Maryland 3 at Forest Drive residents. So that happened over this summer. Construction, they have been given notice to proceed, but you may or may not have seen some activity in this area. There's a salt dome for SHA. All that work is happening on site. Those are two different projects. The first work that we're expecting to see the contractor do in the next couple weeks is the concrete channelizing island. And we expect to see everything complete by winter of 2019 or the spring of 2020 in terms of the paving and how everything gets completed. So we've provided the project manager. She was unable to be here tonight. She's visiting her son at college, so she's excited. But she is Duray Wong, and her contact information is there. And also the construction engineer, John Gover, his information is there as well. So sorry that we did not come as part of our initial project. We do have a new district engineer, and public outreach is very important to him. So we will try to make sure in the future that we do a better job of reaching out to the various communities and residents that will be affected. Does anyone have any questions?
We do, absolutely do. Mr. Wolfley and then Mr. Estette.
Thanks for coming out. I appreciate your time and effort to do so, and particularly filling in for others who might normally do this in your stead. First question for you. On the traffic light, is the warrants justified a traffic light, is that correct?
Initially, when the project was looked at, we did not meet the traffic warrants, but I do believe, I'll let our traffic engineer, I've been told on it.
Okay, so earlier studies when the project was first being conceived, I'm Randall Scott, one of the traffic engineering managers with the Maryland State Highway Administration District 3 office. So earlier studies, the traffic signals did not meet warrants, but subsequent and more recent studies show that the traffic signal now do meet warrants and is justified. Now, because of the topography of the area, we are recommending a signal not at Forest Drive, but rather at Sylvan.
So, thank you. That's good to know, and I'll recognizing that you're new to the project in the area, I'll give just a quick little background. This has been going on for a while, and there was a significant amount of communication and dialogue about this project, and we actually had a number of meetings with representatives from your organization. I walked the area with everybody, and one of the recommendations that came out of that was to pursue further studies on the traffic signal, which is why we engaged with the community, and that turned out to be warranted as it may. So I'm pleased to hear that. But then after that, it went to crickets, and nobody heard anything in terms of, after that, back in 2015, nobody heard anything. And so if you've been hearing, about a lot of disconcerted, constituents in this area, and me and other people, it's because there was this big, long window, and then when barrels and striping, paint markings started showing up on the asphalt, that was the first indication that anybody had any sense that there was going to be any construction on this. Right. And I understand from our staff that you guys are committed to working to make these communications a bit more fluid, shall we say. Yes. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming out this evening because there are a lot of people that do get affected by this. So given that we have a traffic light that's going to be in, that's going to provide the brakes in traffic, is there still a need for that median block that you can't cross over?
Yes. If you go back to, I'm not sure, but one of the earlier slides where it says existing conditions, looking at downstream, no. Looking across from Maryland 3 southbound from Forest Drive and looking upstream from along Maryland southbound. So there is a significant hill. So even with the signal and the potential gaps there, we do realize that it still presents difficulty for someone who is driving to come through and see someone at Forest Drive. So even with the signal stopping them back, we still expect them to be able to get up to speed. And as they come down, they would still have difficulty seeing someone. So we still believe that the crossover maneuver is not a safe condition that we want to continue to allow.
Okay. Thank you. And again, I appreciate your earlier conversations with our folks, staff, and the commitment to fixing the communications gap. So thank you very much on that.
Mr. Stokes.
Councilmember Wolfley, as he often does, preempted my question, which is perfect. So I'll just leave it at thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate the update. I was talking to the Bowie Volunteer Fire Company recently about where the highest number of accidents are that they deal with, and the worst ones they say are always on 301. So we really appreciate State Highway working with us on this to improve safety conditions there. I know whatever the final plan is, there will be someone who's pleased and someone who's not. But if at the end of the day the road is a bit safer, we'll all be better for it, and I appreciate that. And thank you again for joining us this evening.
Thanks.
Mr. Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you both for being here tonight. And my colleagues touched on most of the concerns I've been hearing from the constituents. One of them, though, I've heard from quite a few of them. The corridor that goes from 301 south, north and south, from 450 down to Route 50. Both those ways, there's no speed limit sign on it. And when you're coming from 450 over that hill to Forest Drive, some of those people are usually going about 70 or 80 miles an hour. It's a terrible blind spot right there.
Yes.
Just curious, I had sent a request into the department before about possibly getting some speed signs up there. Could you look into that again, please?
I will look into that. We did find that the prevailing speed, I think, is 67 miles per hour in the area. So you're definitely correct. It's too fast. So hopefully some speed limit signs and additional enforcement will
Thank you very much.
slow people down.
Thank you, Ms. Glass.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for both coming out and for your time. This is a slightly unrelated question to this specific project, but since we have you here, they're at 197 and 301, so you have RIPS and then 301's going back and forth, and then it's crossing over to 197. If you're coming up northbound on 301, when I was working in Upper Marlboro, it's happened to me, and it happened to many people that I saw. The left turn signal and the turn signal, the go signal for if you're coming out of Rips, it's a little confusing. I don't know if you can make an arrow for one and just a green signal for the other, but many people that are turning left from 301 onto 197, when they see that green signal for customers coming out of the Ritz restaurant, they go. And especially, and I'm seeing this like during rush hour, and so it's I haven't seen an accident happen yet with my own 2 eyes, but it's very concerning, but it's also a little, I will admit, it's a little confusing the way the lights are set up. So if there's a more safe way to set up the lights, I guess, or...
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that and
Okay.
follow up with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf, we had a last one.
One last quick follow-up that almost escaped my mind. I want to thank you guys for the repaving work that you did on 197 and the aprons going into and out of the Fox Hill Park area and Tulip Grove and Largo and the like. I will say this, though. I think one of the crews may have knocked down one of our street lights. So if you could see if maybe they'd be some responsive to city staff on that, that'd be great.
Can you just email me the
Absolutely.
location for that one?
You betcha. But thanks on that. Do appreciate it.
Dr. Trout.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. And I'm going to take this opportunity, since we have you here, to get your counsel on a couple of issues that we have with regard to lighting. One is Pointer Ridge Drive at 301. The way the Pointer Ridge Drive is set up with the turn lanes and the go-ahead lanes is very confusing, because if you're in the right-hand lane on Pointer Ridge Drive and you want to go across to go to 301 North, the lanes do not match one another.
The lines in the crossover or the lines?
When you go from Pointer Ridge Drive and then you're crossing over 301 South to get into the medium,
Then the medium
they don't
lanes.
match up.
Okay.
In either direction. Okay, that's one.
Yes, we just to stop on that one, we've gotten email concerns about that, and we
Okay.
have verified that the lanes are opposing to each other. And
That's right.
Potentially, so we
That's right.
have a fix that we need to implement, but we are aware of the situation, and we'll keep you posted on the fix.
Okay, and I have almost the identical situation on Mitchellville Road at the light where Mitchellville and 197. And Mitchellville and 197 is right where you have Lowe's, that area over there.
Right.
If you're coming from Coles and you're going down Mitchellville Road to cross 197, when you cross 197, on Mitchellville Road, there's actually 2 left lanes that you could turn left, but the second one from the left gives you an option. You can go left or you can go straight. Most people in the next lane to you, which is a straight lane, the way the lanes are configured, it winds up that person that's in the turning or the straight lane has to really avoid trying to be hit by someone who's in the next lane, because the lanes, once you get in 197 until you get to the other side of Mitchellville Road, the lanes, they do not match up. So that person that's in that second lane to turn or go straight, they can do that, but the person to their right is going straight only, but they're veering into the lane that the person is in the second lane.
Understood, and we also familiar with that issue, and we have already issued a work order that will put the guidelines through the intersection so as to keep the 2 lanes separate to guide the vehicles through the intersection.
Okay.
So hopefully that would, weather permitting, that'll go in either late summer or early fall.
Okay, do you have any idea when the traffic lights will be operational on Route 214 and Devonwood and Jennings Lanes? Because we had a meeting last Thursday, and some of the residents were saying that since they got some new lights that they're putting up, they're covering the old lights, so you can't see the turn. So we'd like to know, how long do we have to wait on that? Because if you're not familiar with the area, you wouldn't see the light for turning. It's blocking it.
And I have to get back to you on that schedule.
Okay.
And I'll send an email to your office.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, thank you, and since you're just in such a joyous mood, maybe you can add a couple more lanes for us.
Just give me a couple more dollars.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you
and
for having us.
Thank you for your ongoing communication. And you might notice, as you communicate with us in the future, the city has a great alert system. If you want to use that to communicate to people directly in the community, you can tap into that through the city manager's office.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Item next, preliminary plan 4-17027 South Lake.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Joe Meinert, the planning director, and here to introduce this item to you tonight, preliminary plan 4-17027. The project is called South Lake, previously known as Carrington. It's located in the southwest corner or quadrant of US 301 and Maryland 214. Just to orient council to your package this evening, we provided two different memos. One for reference is a one-page memo that identifies the types of dwelling units that you see in these applications that we're going to be discussing tonight. So it's a one-pager, which is kind of a cheat sheet. It identifies the dwelling units that are in the various stages of the review documents. The other memo is our typical staff report, and I'd like to go through that and present the staff recommendation to council. This project is for Phase 1 of Carrington or South Lake, and the proposal is for 695 residential units, including 271 residential townhouse lots and 38 parcels containing multifamily residential units, 2 over 2 residential units, and potentially senior housing. I'd like to provide a little bit of background for council. As you know, this project has been around a number of years. The conceptual site plan and preliminary plan were initially approved in 2004 by Prince George's County. There also has been discussion more recently of a tax increment financing district, and this is something that was discussed with the city in 2016. At the time, the City Council approved an annexation agreement for the property. And the annexation agreement for this property actually stipulates that the tax increment financing application would be requested, and only if it were approved would the property be annexed. So the annexation agreement is contingent upon the tax increment financing from the city. In that agreement, the council supported the existing development approvals for the project, as well as any pending or future applications that were generally consistent with that concept plan. And specifically, the city supported development of South Lake as a mixed-use project, including residential, retail, office, and hotel uses, with such reasonable amendments to which the applicant and the city would agree. The TIF application that I reference is actually under review, and you have a briefing scheduled later this evening on your agenda. The current development concept for the property proposes a large mixed-use development, including a total with this proposal of 1,885 dwelling units, including 136 single-family detached units, 935 townhouse units, 224 2-over-2 units, 200 senior housing units, and 390 multifamily units. Also, 475,000 square feet of retail are approved for the site under the concept plan, as well as 200,000 square feet of office and 390 hotel rooms. And so it's a very large mixed-use development on 381 acres. I wanted to orient the council to the property. The site, as you see it, is located at the intersection of Maryland 214 and southbound 301. This is just south of the Pointer Ridge area of the city. The proposed Phase 1 is shown here in green on the map. This is just the northern section of the project. And as I mentioned, the site is subject to an approved preliminary plan that was approved back in 2004. So this Phase 1 is actually re-subdividing a portion of the land that was previously approved by the county, and that approval is still valid. This is the overall site, and one of the changes that was made last year through reconsideration of the original plan was the elimination of the intersection at Hall Road. This is Hall Road and Central Avenue right here at the northern end, and there was an entrance road to the site that was going to come up at this location. That was eliminated as part of the reconsideration approved last year, so the major access point to the site, Phase 1, will be from Old Central Avenue at this location. This is a closer view of the preliminary plan that I described, which contains the 695 dwelling units. This portion of the site under the previous approval was approved for 104 dwelling units, and so the net difference is 591 units. And this is even closer view, and you can see the layout. It's a typical neo-traditional type grid layout. I'd like to review the requirements for preliminary subdivision approval under the county subdivision ordinance. The required findings include that adequate public facilities exist, that the subdivision is designed in accordance with the county's woodland conservation ordinance, and also that the proposed subdivision conforms to the area master plan, and that stormwater management concept plan may be required prior to approval of the preliminary plan. In staff's analysis of the adequate public facilities, we found that all of the facilities, including police, fire, water and sewer, school, and traffic impacts, all of these requirements for approval are met for this proposal. There are recommended conditions pertaining to traffic. The applicant had conducted a traffic impact analysis and recommended conditions, and those are provided in your packet as attachment 5 of the staff report. Staff recommends that the consultant's conditions 1 through 3, which address the intersections at 214 and Church Road, 214 at Old Central Avenue, and US 301 at the northbound and southbound intersections with Old Central Avenue, that these be made conditions of approval, along with the trip cap for Phase 1, which would result in a total trip cap for the entire South Lake development of 1,568 AM and 2,081 PM peak hour trips. So with those conditions, we found that the adequate public facilities requirements would be met. The site does have a stormwater management concept plan that was approved by Prince George's County in May. The plan is in substantial conformance with the county's woodland conservation plan. And with respect to the area master plan, the site is actually shown in the master plan and the county's general plan policy map for mixed-use development. So we believe that the applicant has addressed the requirement that the plan conform to the area master plan. Finally, in our conclusion on page 9 of the staff report, we raise one issue of concern to staff, which is that looking at the total number of dwelling units when you add Phase 1 to the rest of the existing approval, that total number is 1,885 units, and we believe that that amount of development is too much for the site at this time. We note in the report that the proposed level of development is approximately 36% greater than that which was represented in the annexation agreement, which was 1,388 dwelling units, and approximately 46% greater than the existing preliminary plan approval, which limited the site to 1,294 units. The site is proposed for mixed use, which is consistent with the annexation agreement. However, staff felt that the level of intensity at this time was not appropriate. So we're recommending a condition that would limit the overall number of dwelling units at South Lake as follows. That the overall number of dwelling units at South Lake shall be limited to no more than 1,360 dwelling units. Provided that South Lake is annexed into the city, the owner shall record a declaration of covenants that declares and covenants that for a period of 15 years following the effective date of annexation, it will not, without prior approval by the city, apply for detailed site plan or building permit approval for any residential units in excess of a total of 1,360 dwelling units for the entire development proposed on the owner's property. So we're recommending that as condition number 1 of the staff report. The other conditions, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are all based on the traffic study recommendations at those intersections that I described. And staff recommends approval with those 5 conditions. That concludes the staff presentation.
Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. For the record, Matthew Tedesco with the law firm of McNamee Hosey, here on behalf of the owner and applicant Carrington LLC. With me this evening, I want to introduce our team from your far right, your left, my right. Mr. Arthur Horn, who's my co-counsel on this with the law firm of Shipley and Horn. We also have Kevin Kennedy from the Michaels Company representing the owners. We have Mr. Mike Lenhart, who's the traffic engineer. Cleve Stover III from Ben Dyer & Associates. And in the second row is Mr. Tony Perez, who's helping us with outreach. Again, for the record, Matt Tedesco, and we're very, very excited and pleased to be here this evening. I want to thank your staff, Mr. Minor and his staff, in preparing the staff report, as well as willingness to sit down with us and meet with us and go over some of the details as it relates to this application. It is a bit unique in the sense that the entire subdivision of Carrington is already approved. There's actually 2 recorded plats with respect to the out parcels and the right-of-way dedication. We've had 2 reconsiderations of that preliminary plan. Even during the times of those 2 previous reconsiderations, the intent was always to increase the density from the original 1294 that was approved in 2004 with the original preliminary plan. In so doing, we were required to come back and at least re-subdivide a portion of the Carrington project we now refer to as South Lake. So the South Lake project in its totality, as Mr. Meinhardt described, is proposed at 1,885 units. However, as it relates to this particular preliminary plan, we're only proposing a total of 695 new dwelling units, some of which are inclusive of dwelling units that are already previously approved. Understanding some of the questions that may arise, we have our team here. We're happy to answer all the questions, hopefully, that you all have. I would say, for the record, that we are in full support of the staff's staff report, as well as conditions of approval, with one exception. As it relates to condition 1, which is staff's proposed condition as to cap the density as per a condition. In response to that, we have no objection to the concept, and I think what we've done in response is we've presented your staff, which I'm sure will be ultimately presented to you all, is a declaration of covenants to run and bind the land, and basically incorporates the same philosophy, the same language related to capping the project at 1360 for the period of 15 years from the date of the annexation agreement. So we feel that a covenant is actually provides a little bit more teeth for the city to keep any successes or signs of this project moving forward for the next 15 years to that cap, as opposed to a condition that theoretically the planning board, upon a request of somebody, could change. So given the fact that a covenant is proposed, we don't see the need. It seems superfluous and redundant to have a condition imposed, and typically the planning board doesn't like to impose conditions that involve third parties. That would be an agreement between us and the city, consistent with the annexation agreement that's already been signed in 2016. So with that in mind, and again, agreeing to staff's concerns, to aligning at least the first 15 years of the density to a cap, we are in agreement of that, and just would request your consideration of do that as per a covenant agreement that would be recorded and run with the land. As it relates to the project in totality, again, this project has been on the books for about a part of 2 decades. We have consistently tried to move it forward. Moving a project of this size forward is problematic in the sense that there's a lot of approvals. There's a lot of things that have to fall into place, one of which is market. Certainly the recession in 2007, 2008 hit this project especially hard, given the fact that it has now finally come back. And we're excited to be here. We're excited at the possibility that this project brings, certainly with the annexation agreement, what this project brings to the city, and coupled with the sports complex to the south that is envisioned. This creates a really dynamic development for the city as well as for the county as a whole. So with that, we're here to answer questions. We appreciate staff's time. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. And we respectfully request your support with that minor correction to the proposed conditions, which is we would request that condition 1 be deleted, and in its place, obviously, we would move forward with the covenant agreement that's already been submitted to your staff. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have anybody sign up to speak? Okay. As I call you to the microphone, if you could focus your comments to 3 or 4 minutes and we can get through all again, I would appreciate it. Ann Simonetti, welcome, you're first.
Thank you, Council and Mr. Mayor, for hearing me out. I'm here to protest the defoliation of Bowie and the surrounding areas. You all have one of these, I hope. We're given one of these. Please look at it. It'll save me a lot of time if you read this. Okay. I'm definitely against this. One thing I'm against is, if this is approved, using my taxpayer money in bonds to do something that I'm against. Okay? If you want to do this, use your own money. Don't use mine. If you make a bad decision, don't make me pay for it. You pay for it. I'm tired of paying for other people's bad decisions. Okay? And is the developer here tonight? Okay, I'd like to talk to you, and I'd like everybody to hear our conversation. Okay? This is a yes or no answer. You're going to make millions and millions of dollars from this project, right?
Ma'am, I appreciate if you direct your questions to us.
Okay. Is he going to make millions and millions of dollars off of this project?
We'll have some of those questions for them.
Okay, I want to talk about the death and destruction and the contribution to dirtier air, dirtier water, and more climate change. This makes me angry because indirectly, this affects me and my health. It affects everybody's health that's in this room. Because the more trees you take down, the worse it's going to get. Trees make clean air, clean water, and they fight the climate problem. Okay, so what we're doing, we're spending millions and billions of dollars to clean this mess up, while we're shooting ourselves in the foot and taking down the solution to the problem. And it's free. The trees will do it for free. We won't have to pay for it. So I'm very much against this for humane reasons. I mean, are they going to trap all the animals and relocate them? I'm tired of having starving foxes in my backyard, groundhogs in my backyard. I'm worried about my cats, if they're going to be some wildlife's lunch. I mean, we need, sooner or later, do we really need another strip mall? Do we really need another hotel or motel? Do we really? And at what price are we paying for this? What they're taking down is priceless. I grew up in the woods. It's priceless. And it doesn't match up to what they're going to put in there in its place. Do you have any questions for me?
No, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
All right, our old friend Russ Adale. Good to see you again, Russ.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Russ Ideo, and I live at 16403 Pointer Ridge Drive here in the great city of Bowie. This development is old. It's about 14 years old now. We've been arguing points about it for the whole 14 years. And I don't think that they should increase the development from 1,294 to 1,800 and some units. 1,294 is a lot of units, and that should be enough for them to make their money on without trying to increase it. The lady before me, she's a hard act to follow, but I agree a lot with her. We are running out of space. There isn't many open spaces anymore. You go down the streets and you can almost start counting trees on your fingers. And also the traffic that the development is going to contribute. They have already agreed to put in the southbound, another lane into southbound, making it 3 lanes. But those 3 lanes are just in front of their own development. And the people who want to get back into South Lake won't have any way to get back except to come around on Pointer Ridge Drive, at the intersection of Pointer Ridge Drive there to make their turn and then get back into South Lake. So I think there has to be a little bit more consideration as to the traffic buildup and what they should do. Possibly put in a northbound lane and on another northbound lane on Route 3 North, and yeah, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, I think the traffic study needs to be reworked, and it's not going to meet what they say it's going to meet. And I've yet to find a development that comes up with true traffic conditions. I mean, I've been through a lot of them, and a lot of these traffic studies over there, they have vehicles coming in at certain locations, and all of a sudden they disappear at the other end without any crossroads or cross streets in there to get rid of the traffic. But all of a sudden, they may have an addition of 15 vehicles added to the traffic, and by the time they get up to, say, like Mitchellville Road, or where Pointer Ridge Drive is, when they get up to 197, all of a sudden, they disappear. And they didn't have any place where to get off. And that's, I keep bringing these up when I go before the planning board. Nobody wants to answer me on that. Where did they disappear to? And I'm sure these traffic studies are going to be the same way. At least keep the development at 1,294, no more. Don't need any more. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good seeing you again. Stephen Lord? I thought I saw you here earlier. Mr. Lord? Oh. Yeah. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Stephen Lord. I live at 15808 Plainview Lane in Pointer Ridge section of Bowie, and I've lived there 30 years. I'm a bona fide graybeard. I want to make some comments on the subject of Carrington South Lake. And I'm wondering and worried about a number of things. First of all, we will be getting in Prince George's County the Liberty Sports Complex, which I learned the other night stands to add some 300,000 people, visitors per year. That's a large number. Break it down, it's 1,000 per day, roughly. And I wonder if any traffic studies have incorporated that knowledge. I think it's also relevant to point out that some of the major intersections between 301 and Central Avenue, for example, which are bound to be very highly used by people in that development, are that intersection is archaic. If you're going eastbound on Central Avenue and your desire to go north on 301, you have a left lane entry to cars that are going 50 to 65 miles an hour, virtually from a dead stop, up a hill. Okay, so that intersection needs a total redesign, similar to what happened around the Beltway and Branch Avenue, if you remember. There was a lot of development around there, and there were some major conditions put on that development that could easily be copied and put as conditions for development in this area too. Like it or not, our traffic is getting worse. We've seen many people using Pointer Ridge Drive as a freeway to get out of the way of traffic on 301. It's dangerous. People go along there at a high speed and they pass people. It's a two-lane road. They pass people regardless of traffic markers on the road. So I have those concerns, and I urge people in government to look at a solution that involves the city of Bowie, the county of Prince George's, and the state of Maryland. Each of those stakeholders have a very, very strong interest in this area, and if they want to do economic development, it ought to be done soup to nuts so that the impact on the current population is minimized. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Larry Swain. Welcome, sir. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Mayor.
Always good to see the FTOs.
All I really wanted to say, everything's been said that I was going to say except two items. The city staff recommendations, as they're outlined, I fully support those, restricting to the 1360, but more importantly, that condition one, that be the ceiling, and that we not approve tonight the higher ceiling by default in 15 years and say, oh, in 15 years, where's your plan for the rest? In 15 years, we need to make another decision based on what's happening in Bowie on what goes there. So whatever decision you make, I just recommend that you work it out legally, make sure that whatever covenant is recommended by the builder, in no way do we have a situation where we're pre-approving higher ceiling. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's all the people I've signed up to speak, so thank you all for your participation. Dr. Trout, you want to lead off questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've heard from some of the residents tonight who live in the Pointer Ridge area, and you hear their concerns. A lot of it is based around traffic, and the last one is one of the concerns that I had about the higher ceiling. I think I heard that from Mr. Tedesco, that you were advocating the removal of staff recommendation 1. Did you say that?
Yes, hi, Councilmember Charles. We would request that, given the covenant agreement, and we have copies of, we're happy to share with all of you, given the covenant that's been proposed with respect to adjusting the density, at least for a portion of 15 years as recommended by staff, be handled through a covenant agreement that is recorded and runs with the land, and therefore rendering the condition somewhat superfluous and unnecessary because the covenant actually has more teeth than the condition would. So it would be our proffer or proposal with the covenant to no longer need that condition 1.
Okay, is this a proffer?
We've certainly proffered the request with communication with your staff, a covenant agreement.
But this is a proffer.
It's a request to delete condition 1 with a
Because I know what a proffer means. That's the reason why I'm asking you that, for that term.
The answer is yes.
Okay,
It's a proffer from the applicant in response to concerns of city staff as it relates to the annexation agreement that's already been executed with respect to a 15-year period, and we think that's better handled through a covenant.
Okay, so with regard to the covenant, if we struck out the 15 years and just went with the section 1 or staff's conclusion, you would be in favor of that?
We would be in favor of a covenant that struck out the 15 years. I'm not authorized to agree to that. We've agreed to the 15 years in the draft covenant that we've presented to staff.
I don't know what the covenant is.
We have copies of it.
I don't have a copy of it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, I don't have a copy of the covenant.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. We've provided the copies to your staff.
Oh, Mr. Trout, there was an email this morning of a proposed covenant, but we haven't scrutinized it. I will say this, there was a paragraph that was consistent with our condition,
Okay.
both the number of units and the 15-year restriction.
So what is staff?
We have not put it through haven't done a legal test on anything like that. If we had some agreement here, then we would get to it. I would have proposed a covenant anyway.
You would propose it?
Yeah, to reinforce the conditions as we go through the annexation process.
Okay, do you recommend striking out the staff recommendation 1 because there's a covenant?
Well, if, we intend to get a covenant that says what the conditions are before we recommend the final annexation.
Okay.
So
you don't have a problem with having both?
I don't have a problem with what he wants to do, no.
Okay, that's staff's position to have both?
Correct.
Okay. One other question regarding, let's see, that was on Old Central Avenue. Can you explain to me what you're doing with Old Central Avenue as entrance and exit to? I don't quite have an idea what we're talking about on that.
Sure. I think what may be best is if we have Mr. Lenhart, who's our traffic engineer, because there probably will be other traffic questions, I'm assuming. So if we could just have him come up and better explain the improvements which are proposed as conditions. And also there's a number of transportation improvement conditions that are already required as part of the underlying preliminary plan. So it's a collective approach. What you see in staff's report and recommendations is not the totality of all the improvements being required by this development.
Okay, and let me ask you, since I have you here, what is your feeling on northbound 301 adding another lane to northbound 301? What is the position of your organization on that?
So I'm gonna let Mr. Lenhart address that, but as it was tested, that requirement or that improvement is not warranted or not needed with this development.
And why is that?
I'll let him speak to that because he did the test.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Michael Lenhart with Lenhart Traffic Consulting. To answer your question about the northbound through lane on Route 301, this project was tested back in 2004 with the original overall preliminary plan. A trip cap was established for that plan. The numbers that have been thrown around this evening are associated with just the residential portion. 1294 was what was originally approved. But that also included substantial amounts of retail and office space and hotel. And that all made up a part of that original approval and the traffic that was generated by that original approval. Tonight, as a part of this preliminary plan, there's a slightly different unit mix of the overall development that increases the residential to the 1,800 number, but some of the other totals have been reduced. The office, there's been a significant reduction in the office, and so yes, we are increasing the residential trips, but some of the other trips reduced. So we're not asking for the approval that was from 2004. We're not asking for that plus the 595 additional units. It actually, from what was in 2004, actually reduced the traffic a little bit. So we're borrowing some of the traffic for that, for the additional units that we're asking for. And then we have a smaller increase in traffic that we do need in order to accommodate the 595 additional units, but it's not all brand new traffic for that. So that's the first thing I'd like to state.
Let's go right back to that.
Yes.
Because that was a point that I was kind of confused when I was reading the documentation, because maybe I'm misunderstanding what I'm reading, but it sounded like when I was reading it, here again, it sounds like what you just said, is that the additional traffic, you said, I think you used the term you were borrowing, okay? So in all actuality, what I'm saying, what my mindset is, the traffic study was done on, I'm going to say just for the sake of numbers, 1294. That was it. The traffic study hasn't been done on the total number of units that you're asking for. Like, for example, like the 1360, which is a staff recommendation. It doesn't seem that there was an actual traffic study done on that. What it seems as though is that you actually, when you say borrow, it looks to me like you're using numbers from another source.
Now, let me clarify. So
that's what it looks like.
It's a good question.
Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, because maybe to give you a better idea. I have a store, and in the store, I say I have 9 apples, okay? But I know that I'm supposed to be getting 6 apples from somewhere. So in my reporting, I'm saying, okay, well, let's put the number at 15 and not at 9. But I actually have 9. I don't have the 15 yet. And so it looks like you're almost doing the same thing to me. I know it's kind of like a bad example, but what I'm saying is that it looks like it's not an actual study that you're doing, the working of a study, like you're actually doing actual trip counts. It's that you're taking something from accrued data. You're using data points as opposed to using the actual physical count. That's what it looks like to me.
Okay. Understood. Let me clarify.
Am I incorrect or am I not?
That's not quite correct, but
I'm partially correct.
No, I don't. Well, let me clarify, and hopefully I can clear it up here.
Okay.
So, the original study from 2004, the original Carrington project,
right,
was 1,294 residential units.
That's right.
300 to 320,000 square feet of retail, 680 to 700,000 square feet of office. A small school, and 600,000 square feet of hotel. That use of the mix of uses generated a total amount of trips, and a trip cap was established. Okay, based upon that.
That was based upon?
Based upon those mix of uses. Now, the traffic study that we've done for this project, we looked at the overall Carrington, well, the preliminary plan, what you see is 4-17027.
Right.
Which is what's shown bounded in yellow and green there. Okay. That was 695 units total.
695?
695, right. What you see bounded in yellow and the green there. And then within the overall Carrington project, the entire white dashed area, which includes what's in the green, 200,000 square feet of office, 1,885 residential units, 475,000 square feet of retail, and 390 rooms of hotel. So we did look at, we looked at the 695 units within the green area, but we looked at the 1885 plus everything else that it will be within Carrington or South Lake at the full build-out.
So you actually did the actual trip counts for it?
We did the full traffic study, looking at the full build-out of this area and looking at the impact that what change would occur within what's in green on that map.
Okay.
And so, yes, we did look at it. What we found was, and again, when I say borrow, there was a trip cap that was established, and so we're using a little bit of that trip cap that was already approved, invested as a
Now, that was approved from what?
2004. The overall.
And when was it done?
It was 2004.
2004, okay.
Yes.
That's for the 1294?
That's the 1294.
Okay.
And so the traffic study that we did was a new study, new traffic counts, updated for everything, but some of the 695 units, a small portion of them, is using a little bit of the approved trip cap because some of the other uses.
When you say the approved trip cap, is that the 1294?
That's the 1294, yes.
But the 695 is outside of the 1294?
It's within the same boundary because the 1294 is within the dashed boundary.
Yeah, but you did a trip count in 2004 for 1295. Well, for 1294 in 2004, correct?
Yes.
Okay. At some point later, you did a trip count on 695, right?
This spring, yes, we did.
You did that. Okay, so what was the trip count on that? You added that trip count to the trip count of the 1294? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And we had those results in front of us?
You do, yes.
Okay.
And what it is, there were significant amount of improvements that were conditioned upon this project before we even came in here tonight, based on the 1294 improvements that have to be built.
Right.
What our study shows is that those improvements still mitigate the overall site impacts, even with the additional 595 units. Now, we did identify a few additional improvements at 214 and Church Road that are new conditions as a result of this application that have been added that were not part of the original 1294. But the intersection of 214 at Old Central Avenue, which is intersection number 2 on the exhibit up there. We have some improvements there that were not part of the original.
Now, what are you going to do there at where it says 2? That's Old Central Avenue.
That'll be a full traffic signal at 214 and Old Central.
214 and Old Central.
That will stop traffic on 214. We're going to widen Old Central, so we'll have a double left turn lane coming out of Old Central to go west onto 214. And we'll lengthen the left turn lane from 214 to get into Old Central.
Okay, so you have 214 and Hall Road, 214 and Old Central Avenue.
Old Central, yes.
214 and Old Central Avenue.
Yes.
You're going to put a light there on 214?
Yes.
Okay, is there not a light at Hall Station Road in 214?
At Hall Station there is, yes.
Okay. What is the distance that lights can be according to SHA? Because I think the distance between those two lights are too close together according to SHA guidelines.
No, they're significantly far apart and exceed the distance. Those generally a quarter mile. Quarter mile is about.
Why do we have such a problem with the light at Hall Station Road and Devonwood being so close by SHA? Why did SHA tell us that that was a problem in trying to get that light there? I'm talking about where the library is.
Sure.
Okay, SHA said that there was a problem about getting that light there because that light was too close to the light at Devonwood.
I don't know why I wasn't involved in that request. I don't know what the specifics of that are.
Okay, can you provide us with some documentation, because you're saying a quarter of a mile? Can you give us some actual figures from SHA or staff? Do we have that from SHA?
I will tell you, I don't think State Highway has a definitive.
They got to.
I used to work I was with State Highway for 10 years.
Yeah.
I've been now doing this for 16 years in the private sector. They have guidelines, like if you had, a best case scenario, here's what they would be. This far exceeds it. We've worked with State Highway. We've submitted signal warrant studies for 214 and Old Central. Right. And there's been no concerns raised about the separation. It's well over a half a mile
Yeah, but I'd like to see what their guidelines are, because they have to have
Mr.
guidelines.
Strong, we'll look that up. We'll ask the question if a standard does exist, and if so, what is it? We'll find out.
Okay. I'll let my colleagues answer some questions, because I have some more questions that I have.
Okay. Mr. Wolfley?
Thank you for coming out this evening. First of all, I want to start off with some comments that I've received from some constituents and kind of give you an indication of where things are with the community. One is, sir, I've stated before I'm not in favor of 1,800 more vehicles on the roads of 301, 3, and 50. If State Highway is going to make all of these roads equal to freeways, then it would be different. Traffic signals at the Pointer Ridge area are a pain. The signals at 450 and 3 cause a tremendous backup, and at times it's bumper to bumper. And it goes on to say there are no elementary or middle school near that location, and Bowie High School is overcrowded. Things like this should be considered not just bonds and tax money. So I think that that's a fairly good representation of the concerns of the constituents in the city. And constituent says she's watching, so thanks for watching on TV. Then also, someone says, I'm unable to attend tonight's meeting. I disapprove of any increase in intensity to any projects that increase traffic on area roads that are already overburdened with volume. Additionally, I reject any tax increment financing, which of course is something we'll talk about later. I would like to see whatever constraints possibly made on the Carrington development. It's simply a matter of not having the roads or the transportation systems to handle the volume. And then one more, this one wanted to go on the record, and these are from Deborah and John Rice. Please put on record our opposition to the increase in the residential units at Carrington. We are also totally against a TIF. Even though we have expressed the same previously, I want it on the record. The real issue, I mean, in this, as I've been out door knocking, is where people are with transportation, where people are with schools, and they feel that both are overcrowded. You know, I have concern because your studies or your traffic study is based on a 2004 number, and I know that in theory that's your basis and that you're entitled to use that. That's when the approvals and whatnot were done. But there's a big difference between theory and practice in this case, and the fact of the matter is that we are overextended in both those categories. And even though the warrants on the schools say that these districts are not overcrowded, that's not actually what's people are experiencing in the schools. And the warrants may suggest, or the research, the traffic studies may suggest that you know, there's no additional burden that you need to worry about on the arterials, but the fact of the matter is that they are. So I want to start with a question here. You mentioned this one section here that you're talking about. How many additional are in this one? Are we adding to this section? Is it 591?
595.
595.
And
so is this the section that would be built first? Do you know if this is a section that, I suppose somebody else, since you're doing the traffic, since you're traffic manager?
We'll try to tag team.
I did want to respond or
Okay.
address a couple of your comments.
Sure, please. Maybe, yeah, there's no, I don't need to, yeah.
So, you know, there's been discussion about 2004 numbers. Our traffic study that we conducted this spring did have new traffic counts. We conducted new traffic counts at all these intersections. Route 301, I mean, we're not going to stand up here and say that traffic is great on 301. You know, it is what it is. There are mitigation is allowed on Route 301. Their mitigation defined as it's no worse after you're done than it was before you started. So we are making improvements on Route 301. We're building a third southbound through lane for a distance on Route 301 to extend where the southbound lane begins, approaching Trade Zone. It opens up to 3 lanes. We would extend that back beyond the new signal to increase capacity on southbound 301. We are talking about significant improvements on Route 214 and based on our new study and updated numbers and everything, it does, the 214 intersections pass the requirements, and we do mitigate our impacts on 301. So, I mean, I understand the comments about traffic, but we are at least not making it worse by making these additional improvements.
Yeah, and I'm hard pressed to, once again, the studies and all the numerology behind them, I think are inconsistent with the facts on the ground. And there is no way that the reality will be anything other than worse traffic as a result of this, and that the circumstances of, the minor improvements, there's nothing on the northbound, there's, it's just no way that that's going to convince me that that can happen. But I understand what your position is that you've offset whatever potential further compounding you may have on the existing problem. And I don't think that's what constituents are looking for. Yeah.
Understood. I would add that this has been reviewed by staff. It's reviewed by State Highway, by the county, and
Yeah. Understood. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Don't go far. Thank you for reading those comments. We appreciate those comments. Certainly appreciate the questions. As it relates to the school issue that you raised, your staff did analysis with respect to capacity. The deemed there was capacity within the schools. In Prince George's County, whether there's capacity or not is not really the test. Prince George's County is elected to do a fee with respect to school adequacy, in addition to doing an analysis with respect to availability. So this project, as it relates to this preliminary plan 4-17027 and the proposed 695 units, would pay a fee to the county in the tune of over $16,000 per unit, and your staff has done an analysis of what that dollar figure looks like. So as far as the school facility, that's the law, that's the test, and that's the test we have to adhere to. And as it relates to, I just buttress one other point that Mr. Lenhart made. Since this approval in 2004 with the background trip cap and everything associated with the approval as it sits on the ground today, every other development that's come forward since 2004 with this project in its study area would have included those trips associated as if South Lake was developed pursuant to the 2004 approval. So every other project in which would have been tested for adequacy would have included this project as background. So as far as Mr. Lenhart's point, I think it's germane in that the mitigation allows this project to move forward so long as you're not making the issue worse. And with the 11 improvements that you see in totality, that test has been met. Understanding that may not be what your constituents realize every single day or want to hear, but as far as the analysis and the test legally and as the guidelines require, it's been met.
Yeah, and I understand that, the tests and whatnot, but what I'm saying is they don't reflect reality. And there's a difference between measurement and reality. And that's just kind of the situation on the ground. It's much worse than people say it is. People say that intersections are adequate, but yet they're failing when people feel that they're sitting through 2-3 cycles. So even if it passes some theoretical test for adequacy, they're not meeting the needs. And I understand you're following along the way the playbook says, count them this way, but it still doesn't add up for the constituents. This section is adding, this proposal adds 591 to this section, is that correct?
Yes, because there's an overlap of previously approved units within that 4 corners of that green area. So the total actual new additional units is 591. Although your staff has correctly indicated 695, of that 695, the difference is the 591.
So when would this be built? Is this the first section you intend to build?
It would be phase 1, the early part of the phase of the development, yes.
Okay, and how long would you expect this to build?
We would still need to do detailed site plans for all the different phases, so we're still a couple of years out, although we would like to get started right away. The reality is that we still have a number of approvals outside of this preliminary plan.
Assuming everything goes swimmingly and people have...
yeah, I would guesstimate about 2 years.
2 years for a start out, and so a build out completion?
You're 10, 15, 20 years, it'd be market driven as the other phases go. I mean, projects of this size, they're decade type projects with respect to the magnitude of the size of it and given what is proposed.
Right. So that takes me to the next point, which is the issue of the covenant. And I feel that you're really kind of offering me the sleeve off of my own shirt. You're suggesting that you won't build out for 15 years for anything above the units of 1360 or whatever that number is. But the reality is, you're not going to build out before those 15 years anyway.
Yeah, I'm answering truthfully and honestly. I'm giving you the best answer we have. It's possible that you could build out 600 units within 15 years. You could build out 1,200 units within 15 years. It's really market driven, and it would be dishonest of me to sit here and say we either can or we can't, and because nobody knows. You're asking to predict the future, which I can't predict. What I can say is we're willing to bind ourselves to what staff was looking for, which was a cap for the next 15 years to be consistent with the annexation agreement that's been executed.
All right. Okay. And I appreciate the straightforward answer, which brings it back to me, which is that doesn't offer me anything. You know, a 15-year moratorium on the numbers when we aren't expecting to ever get to that number during it may get to that number, but, you know, let's face it, this project's been on the books for 15, 20 years, and we still haven't put a shovel in the ground, and we haven't seen the first unit go up. So the expectation that in 15 years that we will have reached the maximum capacity, I just don't see that. So, you know, for me, this issue of the covenant needs to just be in perpetuity, and otherwise it provides no value to the community. The other just comments I think generally was, you know, just the traffic in the schools, and it really is you know, a very difficult thing for someone in the community to accept, that we won't have those additional burdens. But I thank you very much for coming out, and I appreciate your answering questions.
Sure, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Stitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank all you gentlemen for joining us tonight. I know it's going to be a long evening, potentially. Councilman Dr. Trout and Councilman Wolfley have asked a lot of the questions that I had. I'm not going to add to those, only except to add and echo what they're saying with regards to resident feedback. My constituents, dramatic number of them, commute along 301, and while we certainly want to do our best to evaluate your project in a vacuum, the reality is it's very hard for us because we've got 1,700 units we're looking at in a hotel at Melford on 301. We got 400 units we're looking at Amber Ridge, right up the road from you guys. And then, of course, we have all the development going on in Anne Arundel County. Commuting on 301 is already very challenging, and so for our residents, no matter, you know, what the potential tax revenue situation is, and we'll talk about the TIF in a bit, I don't think there's any amount of money that could convince them that it would be worth ultimately the added congestion that this project would unfortunately represent, all the other merits of the project put aside. So I have nothing else to add. I do appreciate your time tonight, and I look forward to our TIF discussion coming up in a little bit here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming out this evening. I want to share some things that I have been speaking with a number of constituents and residents here within the city of Bowie, and it appears that many are it's sort of conflicted to where some are supportive of the project and then there are others who are not. And it depends on which part of the city that you're actually in. Some of the newer developments I've realized are seem to be more in favor, some of the newer communities seem to be more in favor of this project as opposed to some of the traditional or older communities here in Bowie. I do have some questions of which I know the answers to, but I want to ask these questions for our viewing audience who may not know the answers to these questions, some of which I have explained to them, but I'd like you to take an opportunity to explain. And pardon me, bear with me, my allergies are all over the place this evening. As Councilmember Wolfrey mentioned earlier, is that this project here has been roughly 16 years in the making?
The first approval, well, the very first approval was the Council Bill CB 13 2002 that permitted the development to move forward under the current zoning as a large mixed-use planned community.
Gotcha.
So that was 2002.
Okay.
October.
And 2002, so 16 years ago. Currently, this parcel of land that you're looking to building Carrington/South Lake on, located at 214 and 301, correct? The intersection in that area, correct?
Yes.
Now, the acreage is roughly 384 acres.
Correct.
This parcel currently does not sit in the city of Bowie.
Correct.
Correct. Question. Are you going to build this project, move forward with its development, whether you annex into the city of Bowie or not?
I would say without the TIF, not only from the county, but from the city as well, moving forward with this project would most likely not occur.
Okay, so if the city of Bowie does not annex this project or provide its TIF to this project, a TIF to this project, creating a TIF district,
It would be significantly challenged. I don't want to commit that it wouldn't or would. It would be challenged.
okay. My other question here, so basically you're telling me that you may not build if you don't annex into the city of Bowie. I mean, I want to turn to anyone on your team here if anyone can answer that question.
Could you rephrase or repeat the question?
The question is, if you are not in the city of Bowie, if you're not annexed into the city of Bowie, and the city of Bowie does not create a tax TIF district for the South Lake Carrington project, will you still build your project?
It's possible, although probably would not happen quickly.
Okay. Saying that you receive your county TIFs, state incentives, you would not still move into this, you would not build this project if you would not receive city funding.
Like I said, I don't know if Mr. Kennedy wants to address this more directly, but as far as I can represent, my understanding is that without both the city and the county TIF, the project would be challenged and would be problematic in moving it forward as expeditiously as we're trying to, given its 16-year history. So,
okay.
So I would say, yeah, but for annexing into the city with the city TIF, the project would be significantly challenged.
I glance over to one of the gentlemen because he seems to have a
Kevin's
different
going.
answer.
He has a little bit more knowledge about that particular question than I do.
Hi.
So.
Good evening. Kevin Kennedy from Michael Companies, an agent for Carrington LLC, the property owner.
Yes, thank you for coming out.
Good evening. Just to clarify the answer to that question, yes, it would be difficult if we did not have the annexation complete and the city approval of the TIF agreement. However, it would still be possible to build the project just within the county without the annexation. And we would seriously consider it, given all the time and money that's been expended to date on it.
Okay.
However, we strongly prefer to proceed with the approved annexation agreement with the city.
So if we did not provide the TIF district and you were not annexed into the city of Bowie, you will still build this project. And
I mean, yes, we will still try mightily. As Mr. Tedesco said, it would be more difficult that way and not our first choice, but we will still try.
Okay. That is part of the questioning that I want my constituents or our constituents to see in the viewing audience at home, because as I explained to many of the residents, if this project is built and we are not participating in this project, meaning we as a city of Bowie, where we have some influence as well as benefits from this project, then it is just a neighbor, a nuisance neighbor, perhaps, but I'm sure this is going to be a fine project. My concerns are here. I'm going to ask, I want to share some of my concerns, of which I do share with my council members to my right here. Schools. I do have a concern about schools. I have a concern about infrastructure, roads and traffic. I have a concern of putting additional wear on our city facilities, such as our senior center, our recreational facilities, playgrounds and ball fields, those things. So I do know if you build this project and it's right there at our city line, at our border, then many of those residents are going to use our city facilities, whether they are city residents or not, which is a concern to me. And yet they are, even though the school system isn't the city of Bowie school system, that would be a perfect world. But we're not the city of Bowie schools, we are Prince George's schools, county schools. Bowie High School has as my colleagues and all of us know here that are in the audience, that Bowie, and watching at home, that Bowie High School is bursting at the seams. You know, we're going to need some relief from our schools. We're going to need some relief from our roads and our amenities and things. And one area, though, that I kind of sort of disagree there with my colleague here, Mr. Wolfrey, is that I do, if we were to move forward with this project, I would definitely want to see a covenant placed on this, as in Mr. Swank, resident over in Bowie's District 2, mentioned tonight. That covenant would protect the city from you all moving forward with these additional units without coming and getting basically approval from this body. The market could drive you to building the additional housing units within that 15 years if in fact that covenant wasn't there. I don't want to speculate how the market is going to be, but typically from having knowledge of and seeing it in my own neighborhood, housing stays on the market very short time period here within the city of Bowie as opposed to other parts of the county. So I could see where those, a possibility of you're coming back to the council within 15 years asking for the additional housing. And in fact, if that covenant isn't there, you don't need to come to us. You can just build. And that concerns me as well. So if we were to move forward with this project.
Can I address that real quick?
Yes, you may.
I know you're at a disadvantage, and for that, I apologize for, as far as whether you have copies of what was proposed or not, but I think it's consistent with staff's condition, although I don't have it directly in front of me. But we have proffered in the covenant that for that 15-year period that we cannot move forward with the detailed site plan or any building permits above that 1360 number without the written approval of this body, of the city.
Okay.
So there is that added.
And you've given that to city staff?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, that came in this morning, sir.
It came this morning?
Yeah, it hasn't been vetted completely, but
Yeah,
he's accurate about.
In fairness, it was something that we discussed, again, kind of in full disclosure, something we have discussed verbally with staff as far as moving forward as they were vetting this project and some of the concerns that staff was raising. So in response to those verbal concerns, we put forward a draft request that, in fairness to your staff and in fairness to your city attorney, has not been fully vetted, which we understand will require additional conversations and dialogue and moving it forward if that's the direction that this council wishes to take. So. Okay. I didn't want to not bring that up with respect to the basis for why we don't think condition 1 is necessary. It would be a disservice to myself and my client to just say delete condition 1 without having something else on the table with respect to a response to staff's current concerns. So that's why it was mentioned tonight.
Okay. Look, I do have a question too. I want to ask you, could someone give me some knowledge of the proposed sports complex that is to occur at this site? And what sort of, if anyone knows, what sort of sports activities are we speaking of?
I can speak briefly to that.
Okay.
Because we are working with the county and park and planning and the other public entities that are going to be operating the sports complex. I believe the primary sport contemplated is soccer. However, there have been discussions of considering some multi-use fields for other sports such as rugby and possibly field hockey. But the main sport will be soccer.
Soccer, okay.
And lacrosse also is another possibility.
And lacrosse, okay. And I see you're proposing roughly 390 hotel rooms, somewhere around that number. Hotel rooms, Am I correct in that number?
We're consulting our notes. I believe that is correct.
All right, yes, 390 hotel rooms. How many hotels are we speaking of? Because 390, average hotel isn't 390 rooms. How many hotels are we speaking?
They tend to vary significantly depending on type and style of building, but we're contemplating that'll be approximately 3 hotel buildings.
3 hotels?
3 to 4, yeah.
3 or 4? Okay, okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. All righty. Did you know that, Councilmember Charles? You knew?
I knew that there was more than one hotel.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm sorry. That would have been my answer, more than one.
Okay. Okay. And question for you, I want to ask you this too. Do you see yourselves approaching this body again for any changes, additions, deletes, modifications, any sort of desires to build additional units, design plans?
Above the proposed 18, I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm sorry, pardon me a second. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, in order to keep everything even Stevens here, you know, I'd recommend that we leave the condition in the letter until we have the agreement finalized in the covenant. And once we do that, then we'll drop that provision. That way, even though we trust everybody, but we don't, we verify.
Yeah, we would have no objection to that. We would concur with staff on that. I think that's a reasonable suggestion. I mean, we've been working with this municipality and its staff for many, many years and have always been able to reach, I think, resolve our issues and reach amicable resolutions to everything. So we have no doubt that that will continue. We have no objection to that suggestion.
Okay. My question to City Manager. Yeah. Mr. City Manager, yes, sir. How soon could you get us a copy of that document?
Well, give me 3 days. I'd like to. I have not coordinated with our attorney to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But because it just came in this morning.
Yeah, and I didn't. And just in fairness to your staff, I didn't mean to suggest that that's ready for prime time per se. Yeah. I just needed to provide you all with our justification and reasoning for the request.
Understood.
To delete condition 1. So I don't want to put them in a bad position with you all, and nor do I want to put myself in a bad position with them. So I don't mean to catch anybody off guard. Understood. It was just further edification on the why. Understanding, and I'll be the first to tell you that there is further discussion and dialogue, and certainly Ms. Levan needs an opportunity to review it and opine on its effectiveness.
Ms. Levan, you.
And just be aware that Ms. Levan will be out of town on Friday and Monday. So.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Levan. Okay.
But to answer your direct question, no, I mean, we don't have any plans to come in and ask for any alterations, deletions, or changes. And we will be back before you, hopefully, many times with respect to future detailed site plans as we get builders on board and we actually start moving forward with the rest of the entitlement process that is required for this development, leading to building permits down the road. Okay. And that was that 2-year time period that I think I answered previously.
Understood. I just wanted, you answered many of the questions. We answered them all, actually, and of which many of the constituents mine that have reached out to me have inquired of. I do want to say that as I expressed expressed to them that my reasoning for looking at this project is simply because it is contiguous with the city of Bowie, and as you expressed tonight, that you're going to build with or without us. You're likely to build with or without us.
Yeah, I think to further answer that question, I think my client really has no choice at this point. We're 16 years in, there's millions and millions of dollars that have been spent, And at this stage in the game, they have to move forward.
Okay.
And ideally move forward under the annexation agreement that's executed, as well as the TIF district that the county's putting forward, and hopefully the TIF district that the city will put forward. That would be the preferred outcome as negotiated with the annexation, yes.
Okay, and if this, by this being contiguous with the city of Bowie, it is my own opinion, and I want to stress that, my opinion, that if in fact this community is built and it is contiguous with the city of Bowie, and the city of Bowie has zero input or control over this, then we are at a disadvantage. You're approaching us, of course, asking us for TIF assistance and annexing this project into the city of Bowie, then that's giving us covenants, and then overall the city would receive tax revenue from this residential, as well as any sort of entertainment that you put over there. It's to my opinion that this project, whether I'm for it or against it, it would make good business sense to be involved in some way, shape, or form because of its being contiguous to the city of Bowie. And if we were not to participate, then we would be at a disadvantage. I do have concerns, as I mentioned earlier, about the transportation, the traffic, the infrastructure, the classrooms. I do have take concern over 4 hotels. I saw 390 rooms. That did, make me think that can't be 1 hotel or even 2. Typical hotels have an average of 100 rooms or less sometimes. So I do take some concern there. I was made aware of this sports complex. I was told earlier that it was mostly geared towards lacrosse, but I'm happy to hear soccer and others are included in this as well. And lastly, I was informed, and when I did meet with Mr. Perez, the community person, and I did fill out a complete, ex parte of our meeting, I was informed that this here project is going to be the largest project outside of National Harbor that incorporates local, small, women-owned and minority businesses. And I am a true advocate for local business and putting people to work. We have a number of tile companies and tree removal firms and excavators. We have a number of those here locally within the city of Bowie. So I would employ you to strongly tap the local market with a Bowie address to employ those firms to doing this work. I definitely lean on you to do that, and working with city staff and tapping local businesses, local, not your Home Depots or those guys, but local businesses, and putting those groups to work, and women-owned and minority-owned businesses, and putting those, because if you're going to build this project and it's going to be here, then I want us to receive as many benefits as possible from this. So that's all that I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for your engagement with the city, and we thank staff for all of their work in putting this project together, this report together, and for their recommendations. And thank everybody tonight for some pretty straightforward and direct questions. And with that, I'll go to Dr. Trout for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I still have a couple more questions, though, Mr. Mayor.
Why not?
Okay. Traffic study. Did traffic study include Liberty Park?
I'm sorry?
Did the traffic study include Liberty Park?
Liberty Park?
Yes.
The sports complex? It did not. And primarily the reason for that, Mr. Lenhart can speak to that, primarily the reason for that is the sports complex is anticipated to be at off-peak times. So the traffic impact study is done during peak hour times, which I know you know, which are, and Mr. Lenhart can speak to that, but primarily in the morning peak and the evening peak, Monday through Friday. So the sports complex is anticipated to be off-peak trips.
That's not what I got from that's not what I got from the senator on Thursday.
I think, please allow Mr. Lenhart to clarify and extend that.
Right, so those types of uses, typically their peaks are on weekends, Saturdays, Sundays. Our traffic studies are focused on morning peak hour from 6:30 to 9:30 in the morning, where there's really no traffic generated by those uses. And then in the evening peak hour from 4 to 7, which is minimal, negligible impact, when the real impact is, again, the events occur usually on the weekends or off-peak hours, not during the peak hours.
Is it also fair to say that this sports complex property is actually part of the overall Collington industrial park?
The sports complex is not actually part of Carrington or South Lake. It's next door in the Collington project.
Right, but I was worried about, the question is the concern in the question is about the traffic, the increase in traffic. And although I hear you when you're saying that, off-peak, but we're looking at the fact that the sports that they have over there, you will have some games on Fridays and stuff like that, and also on Saturdays, maybe on Sundays, but definitely on Fridays and whatnot. That's a bad situation on 301. My grandson is in nursing school down in Upper Marlboro, right next to where the judges go in, the court chambers, and I can't even go down 301, and I only live 2 minutes from 301. I've got to go the opposite direction, go to Church Road and go down Church Road and go down to 202 and go down 202 to pick up 725 because I can't use 301 because I'd still be on the way trying to pick up my grandson if I was to use 301. So, I mean, it is a bad scenario. That's the reason why I'm asking, for that. Was that taken into consideration?
So Collington...
But let me just ask you this. We got a few things that we really need to work out to see how we can make this project work. First of all, let me just tell you some of my thoughts. I definitely can't go with the 1885. Can't go there for a number of reasons. One, the TIF is only for 335, so that's a whole lot that we're not even taking into consideration. And I can go with the 1360, which is only 25 units different from the 1335. And here again, originally we were talking about the 1294, and then when you add the 591, and that brings you up to, what is this? Well, if you look at what you were originally planning, you had the 1294, then you add the 591 on it. That's how you got to the 1885. I know how numbers work. So I'm concerned about that. I see numbers that are hidden even though they're out there in print. But so we need to make sure we get the covenants. So the covenants might be a way to help us. So with the covenants, and here again, we haven't seen the covenants. I understand the city manager, he has the covenants. It was just arrived today. So we need to make sure that the covenants, these recommendations, the staff has recorded that all these recommendations are in the covenants. Do you have any problems with that?
We don't have any objections to staff's requested conditions, saving condition 1, and certainly we are happy to continue the dialogue with staff with your input with respect to the proper language that addresses condition 1. And I would like to correct something I said in response to your question about was the sports complex tested. The answer is yes and no, if I could. I'm not trying to be obtuse in any way.
Come on, we're supposed to be good friends.
No, we're good, But the answer is yes and no because Mr. Lenhart was trying to answer it with respect to, it's within the Collington Industrial Park. I wish I knew what you all were thinking at any given point in time and could anticipate it, but we rely on your staff. I mean, so we incorporated the 15 years consistent with that condition. Again, we're not here to put any, happy to fall on the sword, happy to have Mayor Coppola and certainly publicly acknowledge the shortcomingness of the potential, or at least perceived shortcomingness of that. And again, our intent was not necessarily to force the council's hand in any way with respect to agreeing to a covenant. We certainly understood and expected your city attorney was going to need time to vet it. I merely was suggesting another alternative in lieu of a condition that has more teeth. And so proffering that or suggesting that, it took the form of a covenant. Certainly, the council's and position on what that covenant needs to say is something that we need to hear and digest, and don't want to, not here to force anyone's hand on that aspect. Okay.
All right, yeah, we need to vet that covenant. I don't know if we can do that tonight, because, we haven't seen it.
Yeah, this doesn't go to planning board until October 25th. So I don't know your schedule. I don't want to pretend to know, but I think we have sufficient time to do that.
Okay, because one of the things that I would have suggested, and here again, I'll fall on the sword with the 15 years. Staff knows that I was not in favor of that. And in talking with staff also, you guys have heard multiple times from the council that we definitely would like to have a third lane going northbound on 301, right? You've heard that, right? But yet and still, we don't have a third lane on northbound going 301. Now, you haven't heard this proposal yet, but let me run this by you. Why put a cutoff so that the residents could come out of South Lake to go northbound on 301? Just don't, if you can't do another lane on 301, don't do the cutoff. See, no one has mentioned that. We have not had discussions on that. That's why we need to talk about this and see what things that we could do. Have you heard that proposal before?
I have not, no.
That's my point. There's always things that we can do to work and see how we can accomplish different ideas. I think we need to, we're so close, I just think we need to work a little bit more, Is that possible?
We're always happy to continue the dialogue and continue speaking, whether that's through staff or however the council deems fit.
Because there's some things that we just can't, we don't have any control over. I don't have any control over the fact that I don't know what's in the covenant.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're happy to continue the dialogue. It's productive, but it bears repeating that we do have an approved preliminary plan subdivision with off-site road improvements that are to the tune of $7+ million, if not more, above and beyond what the original condition would have required, which was just no improvements, just a fee. So we are making improvements. There are conditions of approval that are not being touched with this particular application, and this application is adding to those already conditions. Now, whether those are what you would like to see or whether the council would like to see or constituents like to see, I guess that's debatable with respect to the guidelines, the transportation impact study, SHA's approval, the mitigation, et cetera. But I'm not going to stand before you and say we're not willing to discuss things.
I'm going to lean towards city manager. City manager, do you have any direction for us on this?
Yes, sir. I recommend that you all approve the document we set forth and allow us to continue to negotiate the finer points of the of this deal, including the document they sent this morning, which will be reviewed by our attorney for other accuracies and other points that we made. And if you have some points that you would like to us for negotiating points, shoot me an email and we'll make sure they're included in our discussions as we go through the annexation and TIF process.
Okay, so your recommendation is for us to approve your recommendations.
Approve
That's recommendations 1 through 5, I think.
Exactly, specifically, yes. And and even before this discussion, it was my intent to gain a covenant that would guarantee, in the form of a contract of a covenant, that 15-year and 1360 limits that we put on it. Okay. So we were gonna pursue that anyway.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I move that...
Wait a minute, Mr. Steff has one last question.
I'm so sorry to jump in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Dr. Trout, given that Mr. Sedesco and Kennedy are not authorized tonight to negotiate anything tonight other than the 15-year covenant, would you be willing to make a motion to delay our decision a couple weeks to have the opportunity to have the discussion that, as you say, we haven't had yet, related to the covenants and other concerns you brought up, sir?
I don't really have a problem with that. That's the reason why I asked city manager what was his recommendation, and that wasn't his recommendation. But I was thinking along those lines, but I just wanted to go with the city manager to see what his recommendations were.
No, I appreciate that.
And I think with his recommendation, if we go ahead, I'll tell you what my motion would be. My motion would be to approve staff's recommendations 1 through 5, and also include a covenant to be worked out by staff.
Unfortunately, I don't think...
And we can always, if somewhere through a month from now, and the process isn't going the way we want, we always have we will have not, the annexation process can be stopped, so can the TIF process. This is not a do or die evening. This is simply approving a document that's going to go before the county planning board, but we intend to negotiate with the city of Bowie in mind as a favor in the future, and if we get to the point that that can't be done, I'll come back and tell you that we shouldn't do this deal.
Okay.
But we aren't, if we stop the process now, and understanding what state law says about annexation processes and the TIF process, then we would be damaging the potential deal. It's to our advantage for this to be in the city. It gives us control, command over the circumstances. It gives us sovereignty. It makes us the local government of this particular action. It gives us immediate access to the developers, and they have to take our calls. If they build this thing and it's not in the city, then they are not beholden to us. They don't have to respond to us. And we have 123 recreation facilities that they'll be using. The crime issue will spill over into our neighborhoods, and we won't be able to control the circumstances. So, and if you drew a quadrant, there would be recreation services affected, police services, code services, and the senior services affected, even if this isn't in the city. But if it is, then, as a combat arms person I am, then we'll be in a position to control and affect and control our own destiny. Otherwise, it'll be happening to us. Thank you.
So if I could just follow up then, my concern is that if we say yes to the preliminary plan of subdivision with the conditions included right now, we're closing the door to the potential of an evergreen covenant without basically, canceling the whole deal. And the city manager has sort of said that we already support the whole deal. So we've kind of given away our hand on that front. So my suggestion, frankly, is that we delay a decision on the preliminary plan of subdivision until we can work out those details that you brought up, Dr. Trout, about the covenant, the terms, and the other concerns about road improvements that you brought up as well. And I can't imagine, and Mr. Kennedy and Tedesco themselves said that they'd be willing to come back to us and have a conversation in the interim, and I think that that's a reasonable course.
I hear what you're saying, Councilman Esteb, and I don't. Part of what you're saying, let me just rephrase. I don't totally agree with you, and I don't totally disagree with you. The way I disagree with you is on a minor point. It's like 25%, and that 25% would be where you're talking about what we do tonight will bind us here going forward. And that's not what I got from the city manager. That's the reason why I went to the city manager to ask him for his advice. My way of thinking, what I got from the city manager is, if in fact we make a motion to adhere to the staff recommendations, and to include our covenants, because our covenants doesn't say 15 years, it doesn't say anything. Our covenants ought to be worked out, so therefore we haven't tied our hands up because we haven't said what's in the covenants as of yet. We just said the covenants are coming. Am I correct, staff?
The proposed document has a term in it. The document that has been submitted by the developer as their proposal for the covenants is in fact term limited. It has a 15-year expiration in it. I hear you saying that might not be what your preference is, but right now that's what the document as submitted says.
So the document submitted to us has the 15 years in it? Okay.
Consistent with the staff proposal.
Yeah, I know.
Well, this is, as we moved along the process and we looked for ways to continue the development, the issue was that we wanted to avoid, in case the market really gets good, that they would build 1,800 units in a 5-year period.
Okay.
And by imposing a 15-year limit and imposing the 1360 limit, we've gained control over that. And also, it's a requirement that if they were to go past those points, they'd have to come back to us and get an agreement.
Is that in the covenants?
Yes.
Yes.
There you go.
In the proposed covenant, and so they would have to come, and this is what they offered. So we are negotiating here, and we want to continue to negotiate if you all want to continue with this project.
Okay, so you're going to continue to negotiate with them on the covenants?
And to work out the best deal I can get for the city.
And I would just represent on behalf of my client that if the motion's passed as supportive staff's recommendations with conditions, that doesn't preclude us, and I'll go on the record by saying we still continue and intend to continue to work out the covenant with your city staff, and hopefully we will come back and be mutually agreeable. But I don't think the adoption of a motion tonight consistent with staff, although we would prefer to see condition 1 deleted. Reading the tea leaves, I understand that's not even on the table with respect to the motion. However, we fully anticipate to continue the dialogue with your city attorney, city manager, as well as staff with respect to that covenant. We're not running away from it. We proposed it.
I'm just looking at it, we're not that far apart. Let's see how we can come together. So if we can go ahead and just follow the directions we got from the city manager, and if you will bear with us on condition number 1 for right now, then we can work this out at a later date, because we're still going to be talking with staff in the interim, because you got to come back to us. You got 2 more plans you got to bring before us anyway.
Correct.
2 more site plans, right?
At least.
At least. Okay.
Mr. Trapp.
Right for the most. Yeah. Oh, we got a question down there, man.
I just want to revisit this issue on the 15 years. Let's be clear. If we approve this the way it's written right now, we will always have the 15-year limit. There's no expectation, there's no reasonable expectation that they would come back and say that, yes, we're willing to make this a in perpetuity covenant. And by approving this with the 15-year period, that's what we're signing up for. There will be no other options on the table. There will be no negotiations, because there's nothing to negotiate. They've gotten all that they've asked for. So there's nothing more that they need. And there's no reason on their part to modify it. There's no leverage that we have. This goes forward to the county council. The county council approves it in this manner, and we have no control. No matter what people say, we have no further control over what's approved. They will go to the council, and they will have the ability to get their 1,800 units. And they will have their
that's not what's on the table.
It is what's on the table, because 1,800 units, it will be allowed on 15 years and 1 day, and we've already heard from the applicant that they would expect that after they wouldn't get to that point until 15 years, or unlikely to get to the point of 1,300 units. So 15 years from now, they still won't be at 1,300 units. 15 years and 1 day, they're up to 1,800, and we got ourselves a full-fledged issue where we got back to the number that they wanted, without any control, without any limitations, with all of the traffic, all of the impact on the schools, and we will have nothing to show for it. Add to that, we're talking about us trying to approve some sort of an agreement without having had the opportunity to receive and to read and to discuss and negotiate a covenant document. And that's ridiculous. I can't understand how we would want to put ourselves in that kind of a position. Thank you.
Okay. You ready?
Ready for a motion?
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept staff's recommendations, and that will be recommendations 1 through 5, all of their recommendations, and also that that staff get together with the applicant on vetting the covenant, which staff has, but the council has not seen as of yet.
Mr. Trapp, Dr. Trapp, may I make an amendment or propose an amendment?
Let's see if we get, is there a second for that?
I'm sorry.
Second.
I second it.
Mr. Marcus, second?
No, I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Gardner, second. Did you have a question on the motion? Or
Yes, I'd like to have a question. Would you be willing to strike the 15-year requirement from requirement number 1 in the city staff's recommendation?
The 15-year requirement in staff number 1 is going to be problematic. One, because I knew it before I got to the meeting. I found out it just today. That was a recommendation that didn't come from them. I knew this, Kevin. But it didn't come from them. It came from staff. That was staff's recommendation. That wasn't their recommendation.
But that's okay. We don't have to agree with staff. We're here to...
Well, I understand we don't have to agree with staff,
if
but...
you have a question, you have an answer for him? Yes?
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, to the recommendation. Thank you.
All right. Council, you have a question? You have a motion on the table to adopt staff's recommendation with conditions. Moved and second. Are there any other questions on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? 5-2. All right. Item next is South Lake Tax Increment Financing Application. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. For the record, John Henry King, your Economic Development Director. Tonight is the first of several nights where one of the topics of discussion will be tax increment financing as requested for the South Lake project, formerly known as Carrington. Let me digress from my prepared remarks for a minute. It is very common over the lifespan of a development project for names to change. I've had some concern. I've heard that some folks think that the change from Carrington to South Lake was an attempt to do something other than just get a new name. It's not. It's a new name. There is a history with this project. Carrington happens to be the name of a former partner who was in extensive litigation with the developer. So to change the name helps them change their attitude and their perception. It's a normal course of things. It's difficult for those of us who've been around for the whole time to not call it Carrington there. And you'll hear me tonight probably refer to it as Carrington. But South Lake, perfectly normal thing. The reason I'm here tonight is we've received a tax increment financing application from Carrington LLC, the developer of the South Lake property. When we agreed to annexation in 2016, we knew that at some point they would be submitting that application. That application arrived in July. Staff embarked on an extensive review of it to ensure it was complete in accordance with our policy. Then we had all of the pieces there. Once we determined that, our policy calls for us to introduce it to you. That's what you've got tonight. This is an introduction. I'm going to go through the materials that we have assembled for you, talk briefly about the schedule, which is part of the package, so that you'll see where the ongoing and the next meetings will be, anticipated points where you'll have an action. There is no mandate as to the outcome of the actions you will be taking. To echo Mr. Wolfley's point, I think earlier, you may say yes or you may say no, as appropriate and as you have determined after we've delivered our stuff. So no one should think that this is a done deal. It's not a done deal until the Bowie City Council says this is what you want. You've seen some things already in the public world. Back in August, we brought forth some letters to get your authorization to sign. Our tax increment financing policy provides for a mechanism to establish an escrow funding account which allows us to get our expenses in the review reimbursed by the development team, and that is in place. You have also seen that on September 4th, the County Council introduced the steps in their TIF process. What I omitted from this unintentionally was that in 2016, November 2016, the County Council took what was the very first step in creating tax increment financing, which is a step called creating a tax increment financing district. That is simply drawing the boundary on the property that will be subjected to this tax process. They did that. That boundary is close to the dotted line you've seen earlier this evening. It consists of the two parcels that make up the current Carrington approved plan, now the South Lake thing. Let's go through what you've got in your packet. The first thing is the timeline. It starts tonight. 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to bring in our city experts, our bond counsel and our financial advisor, and we're going to dive in to this document. We're going to lay out those things we've analyzed. Bond counsel will review with you the tax increment financing process. Our bond counsel is one of the best in the state and is nationally ranked in her expertise in this matter. We're fortunate to have her. She helped us craft our policy many years ago, and she's helping us ensure that these documents we review have the information we need. You'll see also, at the next meeting, an introduction of something called an intent resolution. This is a creation under our annexation agreement to signal to all parties that we are seriously considering proceeding. We have to introduce and subsequently adopt a resolution of intent to provide tax increment financing. That's a step. That does not mean ultimately when it comes time to vote yea or nay for tax increment financing, you have to say yes. But it's a necessary part to keep the process moving. So that you have it close at hand, we've provided you with a copy of the tax increment financing policy. There. We also, so you have it all in one packet, the annexation agreement. We've provided you with a first look at the staff analysis. It's not 100% of the points we're analyzing, but it's certainly at least the 80% level. What we have done is using our tax increment financing policy, into which you put a lot of time, or you and your predecessor councils, and use those points to try and answer, was there or was there not sufficient information to answer that question or to meet that test or to pass that checkpoint. And again, next week, when I say next week, I mean at your next council meeting, we'll go into this in a little more detail. You next have the application. It's marked redacted. You will note that there are 2 pages blacked out. Sum total, that's probably about 1 page of text. The material that was blacked out relates to the methodology used by MuniCap, which is a tax increment financing and a financial advisory firm. It contains comments regarding the proprietary methods, formulas, and thinking that they use. The nature of tax increment financing is it's an ongoing process. There were projections provided to us with our application. There have been many iterations of projections since then. The last one we received is projection 34B. That is also provided to you. So that's where we are tonight. We've given you the information. It's out there publicly. It's on the web. Certainly always available if somebody's having difficulty finding it or understanding it. A call or an email to me or the city manager's office can get that. Do you have any questions for us now about what's going to be happening over the next few weeks?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. John Henry King, thank you for joining us tonight. I just want to confirm, I had the timeline in front of me and then immediately lost it, but The final vote currently on the tax increment financing from the city's point of view won't happen until December. Am I reading that timeline correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So not until our December meeting, and until then, it looks like we have a bunch of other meetings and reviews and...
There are many steps along the way, and they'll become clearer. We have, this tax increment financing is unusual in the world of tax increment financing because we have the matter of annexation interwoven with it. At a simplistic level, tax increment financing cannot be provided by a government on a property that's not within their jurisdiction. So the annexation process has to occur at a point within this, and then when the annexation has concluded, the tax increment financing is finalized. But there are many decision points ahead of that. And again, we want you to feel, don't feel compelled to have to render a decision one way or another. It is an absolutely open and up to you. We're going to try and make a compelling case. You've already heard the city manager clearly state why it's important to us to have Carrington South Lake annexed into the city. By the terms of the annexation agreement that was struck several years ago, if the tax increment financing is not provided, the annexation agreement, I will use the term dissolved, there's probably a more appropriate legal term the city attorney will remind me of when we get to that. But if the tax increment financing is not approved, the annexation doesn't happen. And it's not in there, and as the city manager explained earlier, it may or may, what happens at Carrington may or may not happen. Yes.
No, so the annexation is going to go forward after you adopt your resolution of intent to approve the TIF district. After that time, the annexation can't be dissolved. There are provisions in the annexation agreement that allow the developer to challenge the existence of the annexation, but that will be moving forward. You can't undo an annexation. So once the annexation is done, it's done.
So just to be clear, the final vote in December is the final vote on the annexation.
I would think based on what the...
No, we did not vote on the annexation tonight.
The city attorney has stated, the annexation resolution adoption is your critical point.
And which date is that again?
That's January. The annexation is effective in January.
Yes, which means the vote has had to have occurred prior to it?
Yeah, the vote will happen before that.
So we'd have to vote in November?
Is it? It's here, excuse me for a minute, because I can no longer focus my eyes.
The vote will have to take place at your December 3rd meeting.
There.
Okay.
That's correct. It says that there. My apologies, the lateness of the hour and length of my day.
Not a problem. And so the total dollar amount of the bonds that the city would be backing, from what I'm seeing, is $31.4 million?
Presently.
Okay.
That's not yet an absolute. The financing of improvements is in the vicinity of $27 million. You add in certain administrative and other costs that can be included in the bond.
Now,
that's the total amount that is being financed.
Gotcha.
The city is not financing the bond directly. And that we'll get into more detail the next meeting to explain that. We are pledging our tax revenue to pay the bond. The county is issuing the bond.
Gotcha.
There.
And from the numbers that I'm looking at,
well, there are some aspects of the bond that we are keeping our eye on. The decision for us is, if we do this, we don't get a certain amount of tax revenue for it.
All right.
Now, we get zero revenue right now. And if we don't do the tax increment financing, we probably get zero revenue when everything else all sorts out. But that'll, again, you'll see that at the next meeting as we start showing you how all of this works.
Okay.
Quick question for you. So understand that the county will issue the bonds, and we're on the hook for paying them.
We would be responsible for a portion of them.
Correct.
And we'll look at when you look in the details, roughly 60-40, 70-30, it's...
Between us and whom?
And the county.
Okay.
The tax increment financing is... Presently, there is an assessed value on this property. The pin on the assessed value as of January 1st, 2015 is a base year. The jurisdictions will continue to collect tax revenue on an assessed value of that $10.5 million roughly each year. And the amount would be whatever your tax rate is against that. So as the tax rate might increase or decrease over the length and the life of the TIF, there'll be some money coming to the jurisdiction.
Mr. Mayor,
$10 million.
I'd like to make a point of clarification. And the bond, servicing the debt on the bond would come from the monies collected in that district. However, it's not the full faith and credit of the city that we would support the bonds. If there's no revenue generated, then we're not on the hook. But if there is revenue generated in that district, up to 100% of it, then we would have to obligate that to the TIF. But if for some reason no revenue was generated in that district, we would not have to go to our fund balance and pay that debt. That would not have to happen. And I want to make clear that.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
But you use the word on the hook, and I want to make sure that people who understand that it's not a full faith and credit obligation.
And again, that's part of the detail that we're going to have explained more. It isn't your full faith and credit. There is tax. There is a tax, whatever our tax rate is, generates revenue upon the construction as the development proceeds. In theory, the assessed value that's present rises above that base year.
Okay.
And for the life of the tax increment financing, that difference is used to pay the bond.
Agreed. Yeah. So the 70-30 split, so we're the 30%, correct?
We're on the low end, that's correct.
Okay, good. The dollar value that we've been talking about, that 30 million, that I think I saw in there somewhere, is that the total or our portion?
That is the total value of the bond being issued.
Okay, of which we're responsible for 30%?
Correct. You will see within the materials, those projections include a rudimentary payment table. Not the final one that's prepared with the bond issue, but it consistent with the projection, and it gives a close approximation for how much revenue, what each payment for the bond will be.
Okay.
Again, getting into far more detail.
Yeah. Understand. And our total payments, you recall what they would be?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you that.
Okay. Thank you.
Because the number, as I pointed out, the number has changed in multiple projections. There.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Henry, how you doing?
I'm great.
No, don't worry. Okay. December the 3rd is the day that our clerk says that we have to take care of the TIF.
Correct. You've got several dates in here that call for action.
Right.
Here. Each one, there is no unimportant action.
Right.
You don't have any ash and trash kind of stuff.
No, I got that. But my next question is, and I agree with you, because I'm thinking along the same lines, there's a lot to be done between now and December the 3rd. I don't know if we're planning on doing this at council meetings or if we're even entertaining the idea of having a work session in addition to the council meeting, because I don't know if we, depending upon what's on the agenda for the council meeting, will dictate whether or not the amount of time that we're going to be spending on this would not necessitate us.
The schedule is prepared showing that all of this would be discussed at a regularly scheduled council meeting.
Okay.
Certainly, if you have other scheduling desires, that's something that is
I'm just trying to make sure it works. If we have enough time to do it in the council meetings, or does it make much more sense for us to do some of it in a council meeting and maybe do another part of it at a work session? I'm just trying to find out what is the best mode for us to get the best results and taking care of the citizens of the city of Bowie. That's all I'm trying to do.
I refer to those who've got the legal answer.
Well, Dr. Stroud, we're looking, we'll take a closer look at the schedule.
Okay.
We believe we can get this done in our standard council meetings, like we are tonight. It is possible, but unlikely, that we might need a second meeting in December, before Christmas. But we don't think so right now.
If we can avoid having the second meeting in December, maybe have an additional meeting in November, I think folks would we love you and we like you as you are.
I understand.
There would be more enjoyment in our heart for you.
Well, I understand. We'll take that in consideration if it's necessary. Okay. You betcha.
If I may, on the follow-up on the schedule, is there an imperative for the dates that we have?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Is there an imperative for the dates that we have on here? That is to say, if it takes another council session, can we just push it?
It will ripple down, this, in certain actions, it will ripple down the schedule. There are certain things that, once done, trigger a time frame. Mm-hmm. Currently, the meeting on the 5th of November is not, we have not intended any discussion on this. Mm-hmm. But if additional discussion were required, that's possible. But there's also the likelihood that it will start kicking the action further.
Okay, and is there a harm in that? I mean, I'm wondering if another 2 weeks, my concern is if there's a false sense of urgency just to hit an original schedule, if we can just add another 2 weeks, does that, not that I'm looking to add another 2 weeks at this point, but if there's a need for additional deliberation that delays it 2 weeks, I'd hate for it to be cut off with no real reason.
I understand your question. Our tax increment financing policy predated many of the recent changes in thinking and examination of our public outreach process. Mm-hmm. It was always envisioned a methodical, introduce it, public hearing, minimums that are set. There is a time to market factor running. In business, time can kill all deals, and particularly in a financial market when the bond process involves a buyer and an extensive delay reviewing things could kill the deal. We don't believe, we think you've got enough time on this. We will certainly know much better what you're thinking about it is in 2 weeks when you get the first deep dive.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Well, thank you for the presentation and the schedule. Mr. Garner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Dr. Trout, as I'm drowning. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Good night, folks.